Hello everybody and welcome back to another one of those videos where I talk about updates on Dwarf Fortress coming from Toady1 and KitFox. And god damn, it feels like it's been a long time since I've said that. I'm officially back from my brief vacation. And if you missed me and you're watching this the day this goes up, there's a chance I might still be live streaming. So check out the Twitch or YouTube channel and see what we're up to. And during my vacation, Tarn decided to post a bit on his blog. I'll link to the related post in the description of the video. But in that blog, he details a few things. Talks about ranged combat, and also shows us some art for forgotten beasts. Consider those beasts remembered. Let's dive in. Tarn writes, as many of you know, forgotten beasts come in all colors. In our initial graphical release, we made some evocative silhouettes, but didn't have time to do them justice. Jacob has been doing a great deal of justice lately. Now, I would like to just preface that these images that you are seeing on screen are completely outside of any timeline. We don't know when these are releasing, when they will be coming out, and when we'll see them in-game. I know that this has been mentioned in the past that it's something that I've wanted to get to, and it's really nice to see some progress. I also would like to note that I was speaking with KitFox over Discord, and they weren't aware that Tarn was going to post them, so there's no timeline for this, and no idea as to when they will actually release. However, if I were to bet, I'd presume this will release somewhere along the lines of Sieges. But it's nice to see what's being worked on, and it's cool to have things to get excited about again. Do you have a favorite from this list of images? Personally, I really like this guy with the weird sideways tusks. They're kind of distressing to look at, and frankly look painful. And for some reason, the one here at the bottom with the wings kind of reminds me of Okami, but that must just be the color pattern. Honestly, these all look great. Alongside of the new beasts, Tarn also adds, I've been moving along with the ranged update. On top of the loading, firing, delay changes, and aiming at specific body parts I did earlier. I've now added some behavioral changes so that ranged soldiers will back away and use fortifications, and generally not be as silly in eagerly leaping from walls and clobbering enemies with their weapons. There's a bit more to do with ammunition selection menus and will be nearly ready. So let's unpack this a little bit. This kind of comes in two parts. The first chunk of this is on top of the loading and firing delay changes and aiming at specific body parts I did earlier. This is referring to Adventure Mode, and will likely factor into Fortress Mode as well. Currently, as it sits in Adventure Mode, if your archery level, or Mark's Dwarf level, or oddly enough, your throwing skill are too low, it can take a very long time to actually fire a bow or crossbow. Meaning in Adventure Mode, by the time you've loaded and slotted the next bolt, you've died because your adversary has stabbed you 15 times in the forehead, which is pretty bad when you're trying to keep an adventurer alive. So most people who are playing Adventure Mode tend to focus on throwing, because you can still have more or less the same effect with absolutely no delay, making firing a bow or a crossbow in Adventure Mode kind of a moot point, and largely an entirely wasted skill. So when Tarn talks about loading and firing delay changes, I assume he's referring to primarily Adventure Mode, which will then need to be rebalanced when it then affects the aiming and speed of fire in Fortress Mode. As for aiming at specific body parts, that I also presume is for Adventure Mode. In Adventure Mode, the way the combat works is it's kind of like VATS in Fallout. You select a specific body part and fire, or alternatively just tell it to shoot generally in the general direction of the character and it picks whatever the game thinks is best. Usually the attack of opportunity, which can sometimes mean grabbing their tongue. Or, of course, pinching their left ear, or doing your best to stab their left toe. I presume this will be the same for ranged combat, meaning you'll be able to select different parts of the body to shoot at, including their tongue, left eyeball, right eyelid, or their big toe. The behavioral changes that Tarn mentions in this second part here is likely what most people are referring to when they talk about wanting the ranged combat to be changed or updated. From my perspective, this is largely a player understanding issue and less of a gameplay issue. However, that doesn't mean that there aren't changes that could be made to make the system both make more sense logically and also more playable. Currently, what happens is soldiers will shoot until they run out of ammunition, and then charge in and try and fight in melee range. Or they will turn around and go and load more ammunition, whichever one is closer. I agree that it would be better for them to simply leave and get more ammunition when available, which is what I presume Tarn is working towards here. As far as fortifications, they do already use them. However, they will not use them if the hallway is too wide, or if they do not see something and something is blocking their field of view, meaning it can sometimes appear as though they are not using fortifications even though they are directly in front of them. It's a bit confusing as it currently sits, and I hope that the new system, or whatever Tarn comes up with, makes it clearer and easier to use. And as far as them leaping from walls, yeah, they will jump over open ceilings if they are available. They can also end up dodging through fortifications currently. I don't know how you're going to stop that without changing how dodging works pretty drastically. So I'm curious to see what Tarn's solution is. That being said, if they are currently in a 2 or 3 or 1 wide hallway with a fortification on one side and a roof on top of it, they generally stay inside of that fortification, unless something really weird happens, like undead with force pull arrive, which may still happen. And as far as them leaping and clobbering enemies with their weapons, they don't generally do that unless they are completely out of ammunition, at which point, personally, I would prefer they do that, because sometimes they can be quite helpful. Whacking thing with a shield sometimes can be a pretty good bludgeoning weapon. And the last thing he mentions here is the ammunition selection menus. Currently, there is no way to select what type of ammunition the dwarves will pick up to use in ranged combat. This can be a problem if there are a lot of arrows around. I've actually seen dwarves equipping arrows with a crossbow. For whatever it's worth, arrows cannot be fired out of a crossbow. Only bolts can, and vice versa. Also, just to add some insult to confusion, dwarves cannot make arrows, meaning if you decide to use the default settings for ranged dwarves, they will pick up bows and then try and shoot bolts out of them, or pick up bows and then try and shoot arrows out of them, which is great until you run out of arrows because you only have the 35 that the last squads brought in the last siege from the human faction, or goblin faction, or elven faction, or what have you, and thus resulting in running out of ammo and then being stuck not knowing how to use the ammo. There's also the last fault that can sometimes happen with this system, where by default it is set so that used ammunition is automatically forbidden. If you'd like to delve into this system a little bit deeper, I do have a pretty comprehensive tutorial for the current system. I will update this if it needs to be, but I'm not entirely certain what the solution Tarn's going to come up with is going to look like. So I will look into that when the update releases. I'm not promising anything currently, it's just an if it needs updating, I'll update it. All in all, that is the comprehensive look at Tarn's blog post from the other day. I've also heard reports that Tarn is working on some bug fixes for the next patch whenever that releases. And while we don't really have a timeline for these beasts currently, I'd expect them sooner than later, since these do look like they are running in-game and not just mock-ups. Thank you very much for watching this video. I've missed making these videos, and I've also missed talking to you guys. I do have some new projects in the works, and I'm sure you'll see them sooner than later. Until next time, you can find me at twitch.tv/BLINDIRL or on this YouTube channel streaming live. Granted, I do respond to the Twitch chat faster because it's generally more active. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.